Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. I was planning on making a Smash video today, but unfortunately I got like halfway through making it and I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't working for me, so I decided to scrap it. Kind of was a little disappointed by that, but I realized I still haven't made my best PlayStation 1 games list that had been requested weeks ago, so I decided let's do that today. Sorry about no Smash Saturday. If I get another idea, maybe I'll record it and upload it for tomorrow, but if not, we'll just get back to Smash Saturday next week. So apologies for that. But with that out of the way, let's get into my list of top 10 PlayStation 1 games. Quick caveat here, this is probably one of my least played consoles ever. I did not have a PlayStation 1 growing up. I didn't get one until I was much older, and I didn't have a lot of games on it. I have played a lot of the games on this list on either other consoles or going back and playing it later on the PlayStation 1. I do have limited experience with some of the titles that are really, really popular. So if you don't see a game on this list that you feel like absolutely should be from a series you love, it's probably because I haven't played it. So I'm going to be giving my favorite 10 games from the PlayStation 1 era. Do with that as you will. The number 10 is going to be Toy Story 2. This game is weirdly fantastic. Now, Disney made quite a few really good games in this era. You could point to like Hercules. This was another good game that I really considered to put on this list. But Toy Story 2 is just kind of magical somehow. I reviewed the original Toy Story game on the SNES that I really enjoyed as a kid, but it is brutally difficult, not that fun to replay nowadays. It's just not a great game. It's not really super well designed, despite like having some pretty impressive visuals for the SNES. Toy Story 2 is kind of the opposite. Its visuals are pretty ugly, even for PS1 standards, but the gameplay is such a joy. This game is remarkably fun. You play as Buzz in a 3D environment, and it's just something really special. It's something magical that you wouldn't expect out of like a licensed game, but they really did a bang up job with this one, and so it's going to creep in at number 10 on my list here. Number 9 is going to be Ape Escape. I love this series, and I'm just wishing for it to come back. If you're not familiar with Ape Escape, this was the very first game on the PlayStation 1 to require the dual analog sticks for the DualShock 1 to be able to play this game. I believe during the development cycle, they couldn't figure out how to like make the game work without having the dual sticks. They said, okay, we're going to put them in. We're going to make this a new feature of the controller, and we'll use that moving forward. And it works remarkably well. Ape Escape is a wildly weird game where this monkey gets this helmet, and it like makes him super intelligent, but also turns him evil. And so he recruits a bunch of other monkeys from the zoo and like sets them loose. And then you like travel through time and like all these different locales to try and catch all these monkeys that have gone rogue here. And the main monkey is like leveling up his helmet to be even more smart. It's hilarious. It's such a funny game, a wild concept. You're just trying to capture monkeys that are trying to kill you. It's really funny. It's incredibly enjoyable. One of those franchises that I really would love to see come back in the future. Who knows? Astrobot really piqued interest in a lot of those properties, and Ape Escape was one of them, so crossing my fingers for that. Number 8 is going to be Tomb Raider. Now this game is really cool because it was pretty groundbreaking for its time in a lot of ways. Not only did it have a strong female protagonist, but the action and platforming actually worked pretty darn well. It's a really interesting game in terms of locales. I think, again, the action is very good. On the PlayStation 1, if you look at a lot of those action games at the time, especially if you look at like the Resident Evil franchise, you've got the old tank controls, which haven't aged especially well. But if you go back and play Tomb Raider, you can still kind of muscle your way through it. It's not the best. The camera controls aren't the best by any measure, but it is a very enjoyable title. I think they did a very good job, especially with the hardware that was limiting them. Tomb Raider is still fun to this day, and I remember playing the reboot for this from 2013 and having a really enjoyable time and remembering how good the original was. So it's going to be here on this list. Number 7 is going to be Spyro. I love Spyro the Dragon, I hate Spyro 2, and I like Spyro 3 just fine. That was my assessment of it when I reviewed the remastered Reignited trilogy, and that's what I'm kind of going off of here especially. I really enjoyed the first game. I think it was the peak of the original trilogy because of its simplicity. It really leaned into its strengths. That was a really strong story, surprisingly. You have all the dragons of the realm, as it were, all get turned to stone by the big bad, and you have to go about freeing the dragons and finding eggs and beating the bosses of the various worlds. It's incredibly enjoyable. One of the best parts about it is the fact that they did not focus on any kind of upgrades for Spyro. You have everything that you need from the get-go, and so you don't have to backtrack through the levels. While I do enjoy a good Metroidvania style game, even in like 3D platformers and such, this one did not benefit from having upgrades in the later games. 2 is one of the most tedious experiences I've ever had. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage was just a tedium slog. The boss fights were much worse. I did not enjoy the power-ups. I thought they were stupid, and revisiting the worlds was not nearly as fun. But in this game, you could go through each world and get every single collectible from the get-go because you had everything that you needed. It was really simple. The gameplay was fantastic. They had it mastered from the get-go. The enemies and the environments were really charming. The boss fights were really funny, and the story itself was very good. So Spyro is going to end up here on this list. Number 6 is going to be Rayman. This game I played on the Game Boy Advance with Rayman Advance, and it plays remarkably well on a Game Boy Advance. It's kind of crazy that they were able to put a PS1 game on the Game Boy with little trouble at all. It played extremely well. This game is super hard, especially if you're going for like full completion like I typically do. This game will challenge you to no end. There are lots of tricky platforming sections. The hitboxes on enemies are pretty unforgiving, but the world is vibrant and interesting. This is a phenomenal introduction to the character. I really love the Rayman platforming games. I do love their 3D games as well, but something really nostalgic and special about the side-scrolling games, and this one is just a really stand out in its genre. I think they did a phenomenal job introducing the character and introducing the world of Rayman, and that's why it's going to end up here at number 6 on this list. Number 5 is going to be Final Fantasy VII. Now, it should be higher on this list, 150,000%, but I have not finished Final Fantasy VII, not this one or the remake, unfortunately. I have wanted to, but other things keep distracting me, and it's not the most compelling thing for me, unfortunately. I do like a good RPG here and there, but some things, especially in the PlayStation 1 genre, just really don't pull my interest super hard. So I'm working on it. I can see why it's fantastic. I can see how groundbreaking it was when it came out, but I have not finished it yet. So it's a combination of what I've played so far and the acclaim pulling it up, but it can't go any higher on this list because I haven't finished it yet. But what I have enjoyed from it so far is the characters. They do such a good job of bringing these characters to life, even in the PlayStation 1 version. Despite having these polygonal looking things, they look really goofy now, like looking back. I'm sure this was one of the most groundbreaking things back in the day. It's probably one of the most incredible graphics you've ever seen. And they do a really good job of bringing these characters to life and giving them a lot of nuance, giving them a lot of good personality and like good relationships with each other. I think they did a phenomenal job with the writing, especially for like a JRPG that are typically a little more goofy, a little more like not to be taken as seriously despite the serious stakes. They did a really good job of characterization. I value that very highly. No doubt if I redo this list in the future, this will be much higher on my list, but for now, it's got to be at number 5. Number 4 is going to be Metal Gear Solid. This is the granddaddy of the Metal Gear Solid franchise here. You've got plenty of other Metal Gear games. The Metal Gear game on the Game Boy Color is really fantastic, but Metal Gear Solid did something incredibly special for the genre and been focusing on the stealth aspect of things. Originally, as far as I know, the Metal Gear franchise was supposed to be not a stealth game. It was supposed to be more action-oriented, but because of hardware limitations, Hideo Kojima decided to focus on this aspect to kind of mask the limitations of the time, and it ended up being one of the most brilliant decisions ever. It steered the direction of the game in a way that's so fantastic. The storyline is one of the most bonkers things you've ever seen or experienced in a game, but it's also really fantastically written. The characters are really interesting and engaging, and the gameplay is seriously fun. What's really nice about Metal Gear is you can go loud. You absolutely can do that, but you kind of get punished for it in a major way, but you can 100% do that the entire experience, or you can go full stealth, or you can do some kind of mix. Typically, you're going to fall in the middle because you're going to have some times where you get discovered, but the stealth aspect of this game is what elevates it above most of the other games of this era especially. I remember watching my brother play the GameCube version, the Twin Snakes remake on the GameCube, and being kind of blown away by the character development, by the gameplay aspects itself, and going back and playing this myself, this game is fantastic to this day. I'm so glad that they have the Master Volume Collection, despite its limitations, despite it not being the best collection ever. It's really nice to have this on modern consoles so people can experience this really fantastic gem on this console. Number 3 is going to be Resident Evil 2. I love the Resident Evil series. I've done like deep dives on the games in the franchise. Resident Evil 4 is my favorite by far, but Resident Evil 2 comes very close. Not just the remake, but the original as well. Despite the tank controls not aging super well and the visuals being a little dated, this is still one of the best survival horror experiences you can find on the entire platform. I have unfortunately not played Dino Crisis, otherwise I'm sure that would end up on my list, but Resident Evil 2 is one of the best experiences, especially for a sequel. Resident Evil 1 did a phenomenal job of introducing the world. It was a little cheesy, as most of the Resident Evil games are, but pretty severely so. Resident Evil 2 matured a little bit and gave you a very interesting locale. It's very different from the Spencer Mansion. Leon is an incredibly interesting character, the best in the series in my opinion, probably in most people's opinion. And Resident Evil 2 still stands as one of the shining stars in the franchise, so much so that when they remade the very first like big budget remake in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, they chose Resident Evil 2 to start with because of how engaging Leon is as a character and how phenomenal the locale is and all the mechanics they introduced. This is still one of the best games in the entire franchise, despite its age and despite coming out on the PlayStation 1. It's still worth your time. If you've only played the remake, go back and play the original as well. It's definitely worth your time. Number 2 is going to be Crash Bandicoot. I really love the Crash Bandicoot series. I had a similar experience though with 1 being my favorite and 2 being my least favorite and 3 being like in the middle, but I liked them much more than the Spyro trilogy. Let me get that out of the way. Crash 1 is just a phenomenal experience from start to finish, brutally difficult, such an incredible challenge in terms of like the time trials, especially getting your platinum relics is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I remember platinuming Crash Bandicoot 1 on the PlayStation 4 and being overjoyed. I spent days working on a singular level. I can see it in my brain. I don't know what the level title was, but it was like a 3.5 minute level. Took so long. Any little mistake would cost you the platinum relic, and it was so easy to fall off the level or get hit by an enemy, some bull crap. It was so brutally challenging. But the platforming still works so well to this day. They did a phenomenal job introducing this character as PlayStation's mascot to compete with Mario and Sonic at the time. They knocked it out of the park and then some. This game is so tight in its controls. Its level design is phenomenal. Some levels are really annoying. Don't get me wrong. The high road especially can get the heck out of here, but it is still so thoroughly enjoyable today. The fact that they made Crash 4 is a testament to how good the original trilogy was, and Crash Bandicoot 1, in my opinion at least, is the shining star of the original trilogy. But with that out of the way, number 1 is going to be Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Of all the Metroidvanias to ever be made, Symphony of the Night is one of the very best. They have not made a better Castlevania game in my opinion, and they have not made a better Metroidvania, at least from that series, in a very long time. And it's such a bummer because this one was so perfect. Don't get me wrong. The Game Boy Advance games, the Game Boy Advance trilogy and the DS games are out of this world good too. They are so much fun. But Symphony of the Night still stands as the best in the Metroidvania series for Castlevania at least. And it's just because of not only just like the twist with the inverted castle and the secret endings and such, but the way that they designed this game is just flawless. This plays perfectly from start to finish. Alucard is a really interesting character, a big deviation from the Belmonts who used whips. Now you're using like a big long sword, you move a lot faster. The character himself is wildly different from any of the Belmonts. They just really crushed it. I love what they did with the writing and the characters. This has some of the funnier moments in the entire franchise for sure, but they really did a great job overall in capturing the essence of Castlevania, what makes it so strong, and then evolving it in a beautiful way. I still love Symphony of the Night to this day, and I really want to just go replay it because it's just that good. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. What are your favorite games on the PlayStation 1? I'd love to hear your list. Again, I don't have a ton of experience with the console, so I'd love to hear your picks. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.